Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. In this video, we're going to bounce around, see some things that are in flower, as you can see right here in front of me. We're going to put a couple things in the ground. We may check on a little bit of pruning that we need to do in the garden. As things are finishing up, the spring blooming things, if we need to do any pruning on them, we will. There's not a lot of pruning to do this year. We've done some in some previous videos over the last week. I think the rest of the pruning I have to do is little minor things here and there. So we'll look around. This is a good time of year to be examining plants and making sure they're in good shape coming out of winter and that they're leafing out properly, getting dead branches out of things, all kinds of things we could be doing in the garden right now. Let's jump in and talk about, we'll start off with a fun plant. This is a Philadelphus or mock orange called Pearls of Perfume. And it's actually an interspecies hybrid. It's an interspecies hybrid between a European species of Philadelphus and one that's native to the Pacific Northwest, Lewisii, which, you know, anything with the name Lewis in it from the Pacific Northwest, you can be assured that that's from the Lewis and Clark expedition, would be where that species name came from. But this is an interspecies cross between the two. There are lots of species of Philadelphus all over the globe, including right here in North Carolina. Some of them out in the trade, for whatever reason, we've seen a similar thing with Calycanthus, where you don't necessarily get great fragrance in all of the mock oranges out there in the world. This one is extremely fragrant, and it's just one of our favorite plants here in the garden. It has a very upright, narrow habit, where other mock orange species, have, more of a weeping habit, but you can see how upright and narrow this one is. I've got a pile of compost next to me with a cover on it. That's what you're seeing with this blue tarp this morning. But several great things about this beyond the fact that it has this incredible perfumey scent to it. It's described as citrusy. I don't know if it's citrusy. It's more perfumey to me, but it has these incredible double white flowers, and I mean truly incredible double white flowers, where you normally see the single petals with the flower parts, but the flower parts are exposed enough here that we're seeing moths and other flying creatures around here all day long, which is kind of fun. You see how budded up it is right now. Only a few open flowers on it at this point. We're a week away from it just being an absolute full flower. And with most mock oranges and a lot of these spring flowering things, that'd be it, right? We would see it bloom for 7 days to 14 days, something like that, and then they would be on their way out. Forsythias and a lot of old spireas and lots of plants like that, right? But this one actually, in this interspecies hybrid, somehow has the ability to have a remontant quality about it. This thing blooms repeatedly pretty much all summer. It won't bloom as heavily as it's going to bloom here in the late spring, but it pretty much has a flower on it the rest of the season. And in fact, when we had the December freeze in 2022, it was still blooming in December, which was amazing. So that'll tell you how long bloomed this thing actually is. But it's going to come into full bloom now and then have just sporadic flowers all summer. I really like the shape of it. I think as much as anything, this upright, narrow habit allows us to have it in our garden here in Raleigh on a smaller lot. These big weeping habit shrubs that can get 10 feet tall and 10 feet wide, as beautiful as they are, don't necessarily fit in a small garden like ours in Raleigh. So let's jump around to some other things. A series of plants that I've really been waiting to talk about, and finally there is availability out in the world, are the new better boxwoods. So these boxwoods are the first kind of scientifically proven blight-resistant boxwoods, and there's 4 of them in the series. We have all 4 of them planted in the garden here. Had them planted maybe 12, 14 months, something like that. So we've been waiting for them to kind of get anchored in, put on a flush of growth this spring, and that happens to coincide with some retail availability out in the world. You may be running into these, and it's going to be more and more and more. When you start, this is a fairly new brand, and boxwoods aren't the fastest growing things on earth, and so it takes a minute to build up real numbers, because I think there's going to be a giant demand for better boxwood. This is the first one I'm going to show you of the 4. This one's Skylight. And I would almost call this the most boxwood of the whole series. This one you can kind of do anything with. You can turn it into an upright, narrow cone. You can turn it into a little meatball. You can kind of do anything you wanted to do. If you were going to buy one from this series that you could do it all with, make tree forms, orbs, cones, whatever you wanted to do with it. This Skylight, I think, is the one. There's 4 different varieties. I'll link the website down below so you can take a look at them. I think they're pretty exciting to have blight-resistant boxwoods back available on the market. There's just always a place for our boxwoods. Our new project down in Wallace, these are going to be integrated into the entryway to the new garden, and I think we'll show them off in a way there that's a little different. Boxwoods are such great plants. They're actually understory plants. In the wild, they're understory plants. They're, we tend to have them out in full sun in our gardens, but don't shy away from having them in part shaded spaces as well. I think they look great in woodland gardens. They're just so adaptable to so many things. But this is the first one we're going to show off of the 4 over a series of videos. This one's called Skylight, and again, I can prune this one into almost any shape I'd want. We're jumping in full on this week, putting in annuals, which includes the vegetable garden. And I just don't think there's a heck of a lot of difference between the vegetable garden and any other annual flowering thing you have in your garden. Tomatoes and peppers actually happen to be perennial, but in the colder areas, they're tropical perennials. Here, we all use them as annuals for the most part. We do have all of our vegetables together in a vegetable garden, and I'd rather not. But we do have a couple issues going against us. One is the continual rabbit problem that we have here. And number 2, this is the only spot in the garden that really gets full sun all summer long. So from the time the sun comes up in the morning right here, as it tracks in, it obviously always comes up in the east and sets in the west, but it tracks a little north of us in the summertime, and it just goes right over this bed pretty much. And so it gives this 15 hours of direct sun basically that, all these vegetable plants really like, and then we have them isolated over here from the rabbits. I'd rather have them other places. Our annual beds outside of the fenced in areas have a lot of salvias and hopefully some things that the things that the rabbits don't eat other than pansies in the wintertime, which the rabbits absolutely love. Finished getting the plants out. If you followed along, this has been full of shrubs and ground covers for the winter from our containers. Just got the last of the ground covers out. Some of them just went in plastic bags and are going to be just given away to some folks. And then a few of them will go in our container projects and a few of them back into the ground here. But it left some holes in the vegetable garden, which is a little unusual to have. Looks like we had some sort of animals move in here over the winter. So I'm just going to get it basically smoothed back out. And then I've got a pile of compost that we got. Humus from Soil Cube that I'm going to spread out in here, and then Steph and I are going to lay out our vegetable plants. Not everything. We're going to do the plants today, then we'll just do the seed things. There's a lot of things we do directly from seed, so that would be beans. What else? Well, we do beans, squash, cucumbers, zucchini, those things we would do. Some root vegetables, if we were doing root vegetables, would do from seed. And the other things, the tomatoes and peppers and okra. Okra, for some reason, is like the rabbit's #1 thing. So the okra definitely has to go into this space. And that's been a funny thing, is you wouldn't think that okra would be at the top of their list, but it just absolutely is. So I'm gonna just get this compost spread out, try to get it even as possible, and then we're gonna get some vegetables in place. The May night salvia out by the road, like a few other things, is a little ahead of where it normally is, but it's in almost full flower. There's some more side shoots coming off of it, and we'll be able to. I just scared the bee off that was enjoying it this morning. As these elongate and then eventually bloom out, they can be deadheaded back here, and then side branches will form. Each time you cut it, you'll get probably 2 more flower stalks in its space. That time limit on that runs out for us here in the Southeast. These tend to be spring flowering and early summer flowering mainly for us. This is Salvia sylvestris, and then Salvia nemorosa is the other one that's similar. You'll see Salvia we have Salvia nemorosas in the garden, and another one coming up right here beside it that's not showing any color yet. But we'll have several of these sylvestris or nemorosa type salvias. But for us here in the Southeast, we're basically growing them as early flowering perennials. The foliage looks great on them, so after they finish flowering, it kind of blends back into the background of the bed. There's a fall blooming anemone here. There's some spring and summer blooming perennials that will come up, and so there'll always be something blooming out here, but this is definitely steals the show early on. Up in more northern areas, these will bloom most of the summer. So these are ones that most everybody watching can grow. But in the Southeast, spring flowering, other folks longer flowering. It's just once the heat really picks up, we have a whole nother group of salvia, more southern varieties that kind of take over during the summertime. But I love having these early ones out here, despite the fact that they're only going to bloom for us for maybe 8 weeks or so. I love having them out here because, as you could see at the beginning, the bees are already on them, and it's an early opportunity for our native pollinators to have some nectar here. I got the rest of the compost pile spread out evenly. It looks good. We've got some hardwood mulch back here that gets spread out where we have some wood chips over there that you can't see. The wood chips are for in between the paths in our vegetable bed. So we are going to knock out several things all at once. Get the vegetables in the ground, get the wood chips in the middle of the aisles between the vegetables, not up to the vegetables, but in between. For basically, they create rows in the beds here that we can walk on, and they'll break down and become compost over the course of the season. And then we can rake that mulch into place, and this side of the garden is going to look pretty good. We've got some bluebirds here, and they are nesting, and we got to get this underway and done as quick as possible. So I'm going to stop running my mouth. Tomatoes are about 9 inches at this point. We will actually plant these deep down to probably about 4 inches will be sticking out of the ground ultimately. This entire root ball and about 3 more inches of this plant will go down in the ground, and it will actually root out from the sides there. Makes a much more vigorous plant later and less leggy initially. So I'm going to dig the holes. Steph's going to throw these in the ground, and then it's on to the other things. This is a fun version of a native plant to the Southeast United States. This is an Alyssium floridanum. This is a named variety called Miss Scarlet. And what makes this uniquely different, it wears most of its flowers on the outside of the plant. You'll see with most of the Alyssium, and I think we have four Alyssium in the garden currently, maybe, 4 at least. Almost all of them, the flowers are kind of down in the plant just a bit. They're these super interesting star-shaped flowers. This is very old, as flowering plants go, Alyssium are amongst some of the oldest flowering plants on Earth, and it's a super interesting flower, but most of them kind of eat their flowers a bit, meaning that they're just kind of down in the foliage. You don't see it as pronounced as this one. And this one, for whatever reason, decided to put most all of its flowers on the outside. It's just getting started flowering. It'll flower for several weeks, actually. It's pretty long bloomed for flowering shrubs. As flowering shrubs go, we always have a flowering shrub in this garden blooming, but most of the windows on them are pretty short, and you're just you're hoping the next thing is opening as something else is finishing. But this one's pretty long bloomed. You can see new growth happening on it. right here in the middle of April, and we expect to get pretty good growth on this year. This area toward the back line of the property is a little dry, and we probably, out of sight, out of mind, sometimes you don't water things quite as much, and I think that slowed this down a little bit. But one thing about this Alyssium that's just truly different is how compact it is. We haven't put a blade on this thing. You would think that I've been meatballing this, right? And I've been out here shearing this Alyssium all the time. But this is how it's grown. It was this big around when it went in, and now it's this big. Again, we missed watering it a little bit, so it's a little slower than it would have been. But I think it's anchored in here now, and I expect it to put on as much as a couple feet of growth this season in all likelihood. It's part of a screen that's coming in across here that we're trying to, screen a shed that's on the other side of the property. Great looking plant. Really, this is one of those that deer rarely ever mess with. Again, native to the southeast, and just an interesting named one that's also quite a bit more showy than the one you would find in the wooded spaces of the southeast. One thing I've discovered this morning is out at the front of the property when I was walking Holly and Griffin this morning, was that some of the abelia around the neighborhood have already started to open flowers, which is super early. I mean, middle April. It's kind of wild that the abelia are blooming already. My variegated abelia are not, but they do have a lot of new growth on them. I'd expect a lot of new growth on them. I would not expect them to be flowering already. Normally, sometime around mid to late May, we'll see the flowers, and they'll flower all summer long, but really middle April, super early. They do have these fragrant tubular flowers, and bees will be all over them. Once these flowers are open, they're amongst the more popular places for the bees to be, and I imagine even this afternoon. We're shooting these videos a lot of times early in the morning just for lighting purposes, and so the bees aren't out and active, but that will be amongst the most popular things. Down below the abelia, something we haven't shown off is this Jerusalem sage. Jerusalem sage, and you would think anything with the name sage is going to be in that Lamiaceae, and it is. The Lamiaceae is the mint family, and if you have rabbits and you have deer pressure, typically the plants in that family are for you. That's going to include lavenders and salvias and the eating sage. What else is in that family? Basil, oregano, a lot of our herbs, and then a lot of flowering plants that they tend to have leaves that are smelly, flowers that are smelly. They have ways to prevent. They have ways to prevent deer and rabbits from wanting to chew on them. But this one has these beautiful bright yellow flowers. I've always find it super interesting how you'll have this cluster of flowers, and you see the flowers are similar to a salvia. Has that same kind of hood on the top of it with the flower parts underneath, where something with a pretty long proboscis has to, go in there. So some sort of moth or butterfly, typically. Bees will figure out a way to cheat the system a lot of times, drill holes in these things. But you can see, you'll get this cluster of flowers like this, and then another one grows right out of the center of it, which is super interesting. These leaves have a very fuzzy hairs on the back of them, which, typically when you see this on a plant, you can assume that it's pretty drought tolerant. It's got the ability to take water that forms on the leaf overnight and hold it in place. This was planted out here in the front corner of the property and never watered. I mean, just not thinking about watering out here at all, and it's managed to survive that. This time of year, again, I'm looking for, things that could get out of control later in the season. Here's some English ivy that's germinated here. Just looking around at the bases of plants and seeing if there's something that I can prevent later on in the season from being a problem. This Jerusalem sage has some dead branches in it that I cut out, and I just wanted to show that your regular pruners, the blade crosses over the other blade, and they bypass the other blade, so bypass pruners, right? These are anvil pruners. Anvil pruners, the blade just meets the other blade and stops like that. These are great for cutting dead branches. When a branch dies like it did on this Jerusalem sage, it didn't come back, the wood is much, much harder. I mean, really much harder without water in it. And it will dull your regular pruners, big time dull your regular pruners. So if you have one of these pairs of anvil pruners sitting around, and you're out searching for some dead branches on things, this is the pair of pruners to use for dead branches. And they just, you know, very quickly cut off dead branches without dulling like your regular pruners will. Feels like summer has come way too early. It's 80 some degrees in the late evening. We got tomatoes in, okra in, and peppers in. We're gonna have a lot of different peppers. I'll put up on the screen the varieties of tomatoes and the okra and the peppers that we added to the garden. And then I basically created a trail system through here with the wood chips. One couple things these wood chips will do, it's one space where weeds in all likelihood won't come up. Another thing is I find that the sponginess of the wood chips when you're walking on them kind of prevents you from doing any real compaction to your soil. You know, if I'm standing on these beds right here, I'm compacting it down, but standing on this, it just seems to absorb a lot of my energy and prevents me from compacting it as bad. Okra's on the two wings over here. It's going to get super tall. We can prune it. We can keep it a little lower, but it still wants to, over the course of the summer, get tall. We had pulled the, this is a 7-foot tall deer fence that's folded over in half, so it's only 3.5 foot tall, and it is for keeping rabbits at bay, and it works pretty effectively. Once the fence that's going in behind me in May is a horizontal fence, and so it'll have a couple boards right stacked on top of one another right at ground level to prevent them from coming in the fence in the future. And then we're going to take this fence and attach it to the chain link fence on the other side over there, and pin it down to the ground, and hopefully free up the back garden from the rabbits. We still have the occasional deer that come in from back here, but at least we can get rid of the rabbit problem in one place. Hopefully that's the plan before the spring is over, because they're such a pain. They really are such a pain, and this time of year they're so active. There you go, a couple more to put on. Yeah, one funny thing, guys, we were filmed the Stellar Ruby Magnolia, and it went up on a video. As you're watching this, it'll be almost a week, at least 5 days ago or so, and we wrapped up a video, so it would have been last Thursday's video. And when we did it, there was only a couple open flowers on it, and they really didn't have any fragrance at all. Fast forward to tonight, 3 or 4 days later, and the entire back garden is filled with this applesauce smell. It's just it's unbelievable how fragrant that thing actually is. The other night, I mean, I knew it was fragrant, but it did have me questioning it. You know, when we were filming it, the ones that were open just had nothing. But fast forward a few days, and it's just unbelievable. This 100-foot long deer fence that's, again, it's 7 feet tall if I was going to use it as a deer fence. I got on Amazon maybe 6 years ago, and I have used it repeatedly over and over again. It's very well made. I'll link it down below. It probably was, I think it was like $40 when I bought it, so that'll probably be $1 million in today's money, maybe. No, it'll probably be closer to 100, but even if I had paid $100 for this to protect some area of my garden, the fact that we've used it I've used it repeatedly for 5 or 6 years is more than paid itself off, and there's no signs that there's no damage on it whatsoever. I can continue to use it as long as, you know, for years and years and years, I think. I won't go over all the details of the Serendipity Magnolia, but it was in a video last week when it was in peak flower. It's just about finished flowering, but it's one that we've admired over at the Ralston for several years, and Griffin's got his freedom, so he's gonna fight me a bit on staying still. That's his nature. Happy to have this in the ground. We had it in a container for the last couple of years, just looking for a spot for it. This corner where we've taken down the chain link fence and the new fence is going is kind of a perfect location for it. This one gets big and wide. I can control the size on it if I need to. I think probably you can see the Stellar Ruby Magnolia in the background behind me. It's about 8 feet tall. Maybe you can see it, maybe you can't, but we're working on getting the vegetable garden all finished up. A lot of this stuff is good. You know, this deer fence that I'll talk about in a minute is gonna be able to go away pretty soon when the fence goes up. And this is going to have all of this space. There's a little ginger planted out here. It'll be fine with it, but it'll be a nice evergreen backdrop, and it'll break up the fence. Once the fence goes in, I don't want to be seeing all fence, and so we'll have to take a few plants and selectively put it along the fence in order to block that out a little bit. Some of the consultations I do sometimes, you know, people have 6 foot, you know, tall fences that they've put in for various reasons. You know, it can be a lot of fence sometimes, so it's nice to put in a few things that could potentially block that. It's not the happiest of plants right now because we've had it in containers, and then we've had it in the ground, and then we've drug it here and drug it there. Finally has a spot in the ground. I'll probably take and tip prune a few of these branches, try to fill out a little bit more growth down in the bottom, and it'll look absolutely fantastic by midsummer. We covered a few cool plants in this video and have gotten our vegetable garden almost in place. The things we're doing from seed have not gone in yet, and that'll happen in the next, we'll get that done in the next few days, probably off camera. But again, there's a list a minute or two ago on the screen of what we have planted. Next up will be containers. So that video will be up soon after you're watching this. I want to finish up the container plants that we're doing, and then we've got a lot more annuals and perennials to get in the ground, so lots and lots of action. And I'm going to get out of this space because the bluebird's waiting to come back to the house, and there's a robin right here, right at the base of the bluebird house. You can probably see and another one that's out there. They're literally stalking the freshly turned over soil, and they want to get in here as soon as possible and make a meal out of whatever we've turned over in the vegetable garden tonight. Thanks for watching.